of the Jackson County Master Gardener Association. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the final presentation this afternoon of Winter Dreams Summer Gardens. Before we begin, we ask that you remain muted throughout the session and that you turn off your video. You may choose your screen view by going to the top right of the screen and clicking on either the speaker view or the grid view. If you are a landscaper seeking continuing education hour credits for recertification, please be sure that your official name is displayed because that is how we take attendance. Also enter your name, your company name, and your email address in the chat and indicate that you would like to receive credit. If you're not seeking credit, you may display your
Marcy, are you still talking?
I still have known this all day, and I've been using my my hotspot, so it's a little crazy. So
Okay.
the class will be recorded and closed captioned, and you will receive a link to the recording on Monday or Tuesday, November 7th or 8th, and that will remain available until the end of December. You will receive a separate link for each of the classes through the whole conference. So during the class, please enter any questions you may have in the chat. And at the end of Rachel's presentation, we will entertain those questions, or you may unmute yourself and ask them yourself. So Rachel will decide during the class whether she wants to insert a break, but we may not need that after all.
I put a break in.
Okay. Sorry about communicated. Okay, so as you see, this afternoon's presentation will be Wildflowers to Know. Rachel Werling is the coordinator of the OSU Land Steward program and the Klamath Siskiyou Ecoregion course of the Oregon Master Naturalist program. She serves as president of the Siskiyou chapter of the Native Plant Society of Oregon. When my husband and I took the Master Gardener program in 2016, Rachel served as the director while the then director was on maternity leave. So she's very familiar with the Master Gardener program. And she is a botanist by training. Rachel frequently, or occasionally, I should say, leads plant walks for the Land Steward program or the Native Plant Society. I highly recommend them. She stops to identify every leaf and flower, cites the genus and species and the multiple common names of each one. She's just a walking encyclopedia of all things botany. So with that, I introduce Rachel Werling.
Okay, thank you, Marcy. That was very sweet. Let's see. Let me know if my sound is garbled. I'm not sure. You said that was your hotspot, so I can turn on my video. I'm not sure if you'd prefer that, or if that's going to garble my sound.
Fine for me.
Your sound is fine.
My sound sounds good. Okay.
At least it's coming through well to me. The picture's coming through okay.
Okay. So this this talk today I'm calling Wildflowers to Know in the Anthropocene, and it's for the Winter Dreams and Summer Gardens for the Jackson County Master Gardener Association. Before we get started, I would like, I wanted to say actually, this picture is from the Zumwalt Prairie, which is in northeastern Oregon, and I highly recommend that you folks, if you get a chance to go up there, it's a nature conservancy preserve, and it's an old growth landscape of grasslands and flowers. This picture doesn't quite capture it, but it's just full of flowers and native grasses. It's really spectacular to see, and that's my daughter and a friend when we went up there a while ago.
And
so
it disappeared.
The pictures are gone? I'm not sure. That was broken up.
The pictures are fine. We're seeing your slides.
Okay. Okay. So before we get started, I am curious about why you are interested in wildflowers. Folks who have joined us today, if you could enter in the chat, and I will watch what we're saying and maybe read some of them. And I'll give you a second. I think, can people do that? Or, oh, there we go. Increase pollinators, hiking. Anything else? Let's see. Important for our specialist bees and butterflies. Lynn, yay! Of course, they're beautiful. Right. A thing of beauty is a joy forever. Yay, Marcy. Fun to learn about and always a treat to see. Yes. Hiking and fun to learn about. Right. I know I have started using a coined word, phytoendorphins. For me, just seeing them and thinking about them, being with them, learning about them really raises my mood always. So we'll be doing that. They're a challenge to ID, and I have to relearn them every year. Yes, that's right. Good for our brains. I think so. Bring more pollinators to all sorts. Increase native plant knowledge. Amazed at the variety of pollinators we now have. Peeved when I can't ID pretty one I want to try. And nice. Okay, well, that's a mixture of good things there. So here's one. This is sometimes called Great Polemonium. This is Polemonium carneum. So that's from up at Mount Ashland. So today what we're going to be doing, I'm approaching this presentation a little bit like a plant walk. We're going to kind of meander along through a number of topics. And while we're doing that, we're going to be seeing plants, learning a few plants, possibly not learning, but we'll be at least seeing them and getting their names at least once or twice. We'll be finding out about a few places, and I'll be sharing resources throughout. But the goals of what I kind of want to get across today is a little bit about the Anthropocene, our Anthropocene, and kind of why native plants matter, which it sounds like a lot of you are tuned into, which I'm really glad to hear about. I'll share with you some tools for plant ID and some of my favorites. And I will also share some walks, places where you can meet our native plant neighbors. And then at the end, we'll come to sources for where you can get seeds and plant materials. So throughout the presentation, I'm going to be modeling some of my favorite resources. A lot of times when I have the opportunity to be thinking about plants, I will have a number of these websites open simultaneously. One of them is Calscape, which folks might know about. Calscape is a product of the Native Plant Society of California, but they have great resources about kind of the wildlife support, how many different species of moths and butterflies are supported by species, kind of what landscaping information about how much sun and moisture, those kinds of things. So that's all on Calscape. The Oregon Flora, I adore. It just makes me feel good to have it open on my computer no matter what. I'll be sharing a lot of maps and some pictures, and some of those come from the Oregon Flora. The maps usually come from the Oregon Flora. iNaturalist is another, that's my favorite new kind of app for ID and just kind of for recording what I'm seeing, and also for gathering pictures. It's a wonderful, it's really up the game in my book about for like plant guides, because it provides so many different images of plants. It's not like just having a book that has just one picture. And there are many other ID apps, which I'll kind of give a nod to also. So, and I'm using some of the pictures from iNaturalist. You can, when you're using iNaturalist, you can say if people can use your pictures. So folks that have allowed that without attribution to make it really easy, I just want to really thank those folks. It makes it easy to put a presentation together. So I'm hoping that you'll learn to use these resources. The first time I gave a presentation that was kind of similar to this, folks were taking screenshots and trying to, ID with my pictures, and I don't recommend that you do that, but rather that you learn to use these resources for ID. The pictures that I have will just be kind of give you a sense of the species and the places that we're going to be visiting. So that's kind of background. And now to really kind of, before we get started, I want to give an acknowledgement. So especially perhaps because I care a lot about native plants, and native plants have this long history of relationship with native people. So you all are with me, and we're all brought together by this mutual curiosity and love for native plants. So I want to remember and acknowledge that these plants we care so deeply about have an ancient and reciprocal relationship with native people. We're together on Zoom, but wherever we find ourselves, we are on native land. This map is one way to explore native lands. In Ashland, where I'm sitting today, we are on the traditional lands of Takilma, Shasta, and Letgawa people who were forcibly removed and to whom we owe an unpaid debt of land, culture, and history. Some of the reading that I've done about these topics, in one book it described the land as being widowed from the Native American people that had this relationship with them. And many of the plants that we see and learn about, you know, their survival is now changed because they're not having that ongoing relationship with Native peoples. So kind of leveraging off of that topic, the first group, a little group of plants that I wanted to share with you today are biscuit roots. So biscuit roots are in some ways sort of a lesson in sort of the understated. I really love them. The genus is Lomatium, and they are in the carrot family, which is Apiaceae or umbelliferae. And I love to go into what all of those things mean. They often have ferny kind of leaves, very fern-like. They have an umbel inflorescence that has a number of little flowers that create one inflorescence. The lomatiums have these really deep storage roots, as you can see in this picture of 9-leaf lomatium. I was looking online for a picture that I saw one time that had big leaf lomatium, which had a root about as big as my head, about 18 inches under the soil from the plant above. So these plants, with these deep storage roots, they have been sources of food and also often medicinal plants really throughout their range and across cultures. And with those, again, with those deep roots, they're really long-lived perennials and they're very fire resistant. Our grasslands in our area used to be burned sometimes as often as every 2 years by Native Americans, and many of these lomatiums lived in that context. But with that big root under there, it didn't bother them at all. And they also really, the drought, they are unaffected by the kinds of droughts even that we are now kind of experiencing with that big storage root so deep down. So that makes them good for fire, and that also makes them good for landscape plants that don't need a lot of water. So now we're going to learn a few of them. Oh, and I didn't mention, as many of the carrot family members are, they are swallowtail butterfly host plants. So a lot of our swallowtails love these plants and use them for their caterpillars. So desert parsley is one of our most common, and I have a slide about names further on, but names, there are, as Marcy was saying, there are usually lots of common names, and then the scientific names have been changing a lot as well. So I really recommend that you get to learn the creature and then all the names that go with it, but identifying the creature itself is kind of the beginning of it. So this is desert parsley, sometimes called biscuit root, and this is, the genus is Lomatium, it's Lomatium utriculatum. So has really bright yellow flowers. These are all little tiny flowers together in bundles like that. They have these ferny leaves and it's kind of low growing and bright yellow like that. So that's biscuit root, common in our grasslands, in our oak savannas and oak habitats, as most of our lomatiums are. This one is 9-leaved lomatium, so the one that showed the roots with the storage roots on those very small examples of it. So this has not quite as fine of leaves. You might think it would have 9, but it has more than 9, but it's not like a mass of ferny leaflets on their leaves, and kind of a paler color yellow and not as dense. So this one is called big fruit lomatium, and now this one has more grayish foliage. This is from the Imperatrice property, which belongs to Ashland, which we aren't able to access these days, but it's a wonderful grassland that has grasshopper sparrows and lots of native plants. And so this one has, again, kind of a paler, creamy inflorescence and a paler, very fine leaves kind of put together like that. And again, you can imagine that big storage root underground every year sending up this big, wonderful plant. This one is fernleaf lomatium, which is one of our common species, pretty big plant, can be as big as like thigh high with this wonderful inflorescence, kind of greenish, even to brownish. That umbel, that's a real example of the umbel inflorescence, which looks a little bit like an umbrella of flowers. And again, as you might think, it has these kind of fern-shaped leaves, and that's Lomatium dissectum, and that one is a powerful antiviral, still used in that way for medicinal purposes. California Lomatium is one of my very favorites. I'm starting in my garden several of these. California Lomatium is one of them. Sometimes it's called wild celery, and you can see it has these kind of broader leaflet segments. And really, if you grow celery in your garden and you know what those leaflet segments look like, it looks kind of similar to that. It tastes very much like celery. I actually put it into soup stocks. It's a wonderful plant to eat. And it has this yellowish, kind of yellowish greenish flowers. Again, another pretty big one. Once it gets really well established, again, it can be kind of above your knee in terms of how big it is. And then this one is a wonderful little plant that does really well in rocky outcrops and clay soils. And this one's called pestle lomatium because it has this kind of, you can see where, again, this is creating this umbel inflorescence with these bundles of small flowers, small yellow flowers. Many fewer leaflets, just maybe 5 leaflets on the leaves, but they're bigger. And then at where the flowers come together, where the inflorescence comes together there, this part of the plant will swell up over the dry season. So at the end of the dry season, it has something that looks like a pestle, if you think of a mortar and a pestle. So that pestle there is kind of spreading out with all the seeds above it, and that's pestle lomatium. I have at the beginning of the pandemic, through the pandemic, I was working on trying to put together a few little short video clips to help people learn species since we couldn't take people out on plant walks. And if we have time at the end and there's interest, I will show those, but I find them kind of irritating because now YouTube always puts advertisements for things like dog food and, you know, I don't know what other things at the beginning. So if we want, we can look at a few of those, but there's one, and I will definitely share the links with that at the end, and with a link that I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. So I have one that's called Biscuit Roots and Friends that goes through a lot of these, and they give you little kind of tips on how to identify them and in a kind of a moving context, which helps you see them a little bit better. And then you can kind of review and practice learning them in the spring is when that video was taken. So again, coming back around, lomatiums were really key food stuff for Native people, and there's a group right now called the Indigenous Gardens Network that is working to reconnect people who are originally from this area with traditional gathering grounds and gardening areas. Vesper Meadows is really involved in this, as well as Brooke Calais from the Southern Oregon University, connecting with people who are currently living in the Silettes and Grand Ronde or in this area, although there aren't a lot of Native people that are still living here, but bringing them and reconnecting them with these gathering areas. When I find areas that have lots of lomatiums like that, especially like the one where I showed that video is located, I'm sure that was a gathering area in the past. It's so dense with lomatiums. So that turned out to be a really long land acknowledgement, and you didn't even notice it. And now we're going to move on to what is the Anthropocene. So the geology lovers amongst you will know that we divide our kind of our ages in geology based on the things that are found in the strata of the earth as people go down. So you can see, going back, 4.5 billion years, they're categorizing it by what they find in the rocks and what the rocks are like. So once life got going, about 500 million years ago, then it's based on what the organisms were that were there. And every now and then there'd be a big extinction, and species would disappear from the strata, and other species would come in. So geologists really have started to call our current age the Anthropocene. So what really is the Anthropocene? So it's a geological age that will be differentiated from those that came before by identifiable characteristics, including the disappearance of species like mass extinctions, like the one that we're in currently. A lot of species are going extinct, and when that's compressed in a geological layer, that will look like it happened overnight. disappearance of species, a sudden worldwide distribution of other species. So think of like corn, which started as a wild plant in Mexico, was domesticated in Mexico and spread throughout the Americas, and now it's a global crop plant. So now it's everywhere. Chickens, for example, are another species. There will be a chemical signature in this layer, like the KT boundary where the dinosaurs went extinct. There's a layer there that is kind of a result of that asteroid impact that left something that you could see in that layer. And we will have a chemical signature in our layer based on all the chemicals that we have here: plastics, glass, concrete, pollutants, and those kinds of things. So we really are in something now that's called the Anthropocene. So let's look at the Anthropocene through a flower of the genus Rubus. So here's our chance to learn a few flowers again. So we're going to look a little bit at Rubus armeniacus, which some people just call blackberry or Himalayan blackberry. So it is a non-native invasive plant. I've read in a few Forest Service documents, they call it the most invasive shrub in the Pacific Northwest. So non-native invasive plants, people kind of wonder, or we talk about a weed. What is a weed? We're talking about really kind of invasive or noxious weeds in this case. But a weed, or in this case, a non-native, has been taken out of its own ecological context. So it's evolved someplace within a system of other species that kind of kept it in check. So it's been taken into a new context where it lacks any kinds of predators. So those might be insects, viruses, fungi, herbivores, all those things. It's released from those things. They're not in a competitive balance in their ecosystem, so they can outcompete and damage native plant communities and systems. Life is much easier for them, so they proliferate. It's kind of like you might live in your own, if you think of sort of energy or money as the equivalent of energy, like if you won the lottery, suddenly you wouldn't have to think about what you bought or what you did or where you went. And these plants are like that. They suddenly have an abundance of energetic resource, and they sometimes get bigger, they spread faster, they just do a lot better than the native plants, which are all within this context that they've evolved in. The weeds have been ecologically released. So let's look a little closer at Himalayan blackberry with the idea of the Anthropocene. So it's native over here in the Middle East, and it is not invasive. It just lives within its context. But now it's spread all over the world, lots of places. So now when it shows up in the geological record, it will be everywhere millions of years from now. When they look for it, they'll see it. So to identify, we're going to look at a few Rubus species here. So here's its flower. One of the really key characteristics of Himalayan blackberry is that when the stalks get bigger, they have this angularity to them. That's really characteristic. They have 5 leaflets on each leaf. You can see there's their fruit, and the fruit is delicious and wonderful to make berries. And they have these beautiful rose family flowers, like all of the Rubus do. So that's Rubus armeniacus. And people often wonder, what is our native blackberry? So trailing blackberry is our native blackberry. So we looked at that map that was for the invasive blackberry. Here's our trailing blackberry locations out of Oregon flora. So if you click on the map in Oregon flora, this is what you'll come up with, and you can see where this plant is native to. It isn't across the world. So trailing blackberry, the stems don't get that angularity. They don't generally get as big either. The Himalayan blackberry also, or Armenian blackberry, has a reddish cast when the stems get bigger often, but trailing blackberry, they're more round. They can kind of zigzag back and forth a little bit, but they're still round in cross section. They don't have those angles. The flower petals tend to be longer like this, and you can see that they support native species. So here, this is out of Calscape, I'll remind you. So butterflies and moths hosted, 4 are confirmed and 63 are likely. So that's our trailing blackberry. And now we also have wild raspberries, which are Rubus leucodermis, and leuco means white and dermis means skin. So it's sometimes called white bark raspberry. And you can see it can get big, hefty canes or stalks like the Armenian blackberry, but they are round in cross section and they have that white kind of blush to them. They also can have 5 generally have 5 leaflets, like the Himalayan blackberry, but again, the canes are very different, and the berries are different looking. The petals on the flowers are smaller, and you can see I'm also kind of showing here, this is the map of the distribution in our area. And if you clicked on this map in the Oregon flora, then it would pop out into that bigger map and show you kind of where it is throughout the Americas or the West. That was in the other picture. That is kind of how I use that map. And then this is from Calscape. So this is from Oregon flora. And then this is from Calscape that shows you how many, it says again, 64 likely butterflies and moths that are supported by that species. We have another rubus in our area called Rubus parviflorus, or in some cases it might be changing now to Rubus nutcanus, which is thimbleberry. So thimbleberry still has that, again, that kind of rose-looking flower, the rose family flower. It has, but it doesn't have a compound leaf like the other blackberries, the rubus that we've been seeing. So this has a big, simple leaf that looks a little bit like a maple leaf. It has the berries that it's called a thimbleberry. You can peel that off and put that on your finger if you want. And again, here from Calscape is the information about how many butterflies and moths are hosted by it. So this one says 2 confirmed and 70 likely. Really, there's much more to be learned about how many species are supported by all these different wildlife. So now let's do a little review. I'm going to put up a picture, and you can put into the chat which species you think this is. Is this, and we'll see if anybody remembers. And if you can't remember the name of the species, tell me if you think it's native or not native. Native, we've got native, native, native. Anyone remember which species that is? The round, kind of sturdy raspberry native. Yes. Yes, very good. Okay, next one. So that is one of our natives. And who is this? Look at that reddish, kind of angular stem over there. Is that native or not native? Not native. That's our Himalayan blackberry. Good job, you guys. Very good. Okay, and then this one. Who is this one? Trailing blackberry. Correct. Yes. That one is trailing blackberry. Even when that Himalayan blackberry is small, it still tends to have 5 leaflets like this, whereas our trailing blackberry has 3 like this. And then finally, who is this one? More distinguishable. Thimbleberry, yes, good job. Very good. Okay, so without any flowers, you identified that plant. Good job. Okay, so that was our look at the Anthropocene, seeing the Himalayan blackberry being spread all over, kind of being a marker in our geological record. So let's go back to that Anthropocene and talk a little bit about the loss of species. So in 2019, I was putting together a similar talk to this for Winter Dreams, and I was looking at there were a number of headlines coming out, and many of them were based on this World Wildlife Fund's Living Planet report, which showed that they were documenting a 60% fall in wildlife populations. So in numbers of populations, kind of averaging population increase or decrease between 1970 and 2014. So they said, we've seen an astonishing 60% decline in the size of populations of mammals, birds, fish, reptiles, and amphibians in just over 40 years. The top threats to species linked directly to human activities, including habitat loss, which is one of the things we're going to talk about, and degradation. So when I kind of looked into that for this presentation this time, so this was in 2019, now the numbers are showing a 69% decrease for those similar things. So that's like a real time, I'm watching that, seeing that happen. It could be a shifting baseline where I would think, oh, it's 60, but now it's 69 and I'm not noticing it, but it's changing in my lifetime. This is some of the information that comes out of this report, and I think every year they put out the report, or maybe every 2 years, I'm not sure, but this is, what we're looking at here is looking at where the losses are happening. So we're in the Nearctic, and we've had 23% average loss, between 11 and 47, depending on what kind of organism you're looking at. Neotropical losses were the worst with 89%. These bar graphs show you what the biggest threats are to habitat loss. And if we look at them down here, this is the key. You can see red is habitat loss. So these are birds, mammals, fishes, reptiles, and amphibians. They're not talking about plants. They could be, but all of these organisms depend on plants and habitats that are created by plants. Plants also need habitat, but habitat loss is the biggest risk. And climate change is part of what's driving habitat loss, but really a lot of it is human use. So kind of just summarize that. All creatures need habitat. That's food. We talk about habitat. It's food, water, shelter, and space to forage, reproduce, and live. A loss of habitat is accompanied by population decline. So nowhere to live. So this is a beautiful picture from our Applegate showing this diverse and varied habitat, native habitats that we have here in the Siskiyou Mountains. So in the World Wildlife Fund's report, land degradation, and there are other studies that back that up as well. They're kind of compiling the information, but land degradation seriously impacts 75% of terrestrial ecosystems. So that kind of translate into a 69% decrease in wildlife populations between 1970 and 2018 globally. So those are sort of big global concepts, and we can bring it right down into a local level. So let's talk about our local oak habitats and oak habitat in decline. So these are images of oak habitat in the Willamette Valley oak habitat. So this is 1938, and you can see lots of oaks around there, white oaks probably mostly in the valley bottoms. And then in 2007, my cat thinks he needs something. We're going to put you outside there, fella. Yeah. So 2007, what do you think is happening in the valley there that's causing the oaks to go away? And then this is from 2013. So that's the Willamette Valley. Let's bring it even more local. So this is Jackson County. And the green is our white oaks and the purple is our black oaks. So notice all this area that doesn't have oaks in it in the valley bottom. This is the I-5 going through here. What's going on in the valley bottoms that would be white oak habitat predominantly? So here's Google Earth's image of that, and you can see what we know is in that area is all of our agriculture and our urban kind of activities that are going on there. So let's go back, and there are our oaks, and here's what it looks like in terms of our land use from Google Earth, which I find very useful to kind of see. So let's now kind of bring that to a really specific example. Let's talk about Cook's lomatium. So Cook's lomatium is an endangered species. This is a map from the Oregon flora, and you can see this is where it occurs in all the world. That's where it occurs. And if we kind of zoom in on this area in Jackson County where it occurs, this is White City. And so this is Central Point right here. I don't think we're quite to where the extension center is, but you can these are the table rocks up here. And these blue triangles are the sites of Cook's lomatium. And if we zoom in a little bit more, we can see, oh, look, this is kind of agate desert country around here. This would have been oak savanna. These little triangles and dots are where you see they get confused in these other like shopping opportunities, but you can see that we amazingly we've put a major metropolitan area on one of the only habitats for Cook's lomatium. So what does that plant look like? This is another biscuit root. We love our biscuit roots. So there it is, and Cook's lomatium is an example of a plant that's kind of getting nowhere to live. There are some preserves out there, but there's still active use of those lands and kind of transforming native habitats, native plant habitats into human use, which we have needs. So there's that. So this is from the Southern Oregon Land Conservancy's Whetstone Savanna Preserve. It used to be the Nature Conservancy and now it's Southern Oregon Land Conservancy. So now we're going to kind of shift in our meandering to take a little look at what that whetstone preserve looks like. So here we are. It looks awesome from the level of the large flowered woolly meadow foam. There are the table rocks. And this is another endangered plant that has a very restricted range. And it's a beautiful, wonderful habitat. They offer walks out there. I think that it is open to the public with careful use, but it's nice to go on a guided walk with people who can show you what you're looking at. There are fairy shrimp in the vernal pools in the early spring, as well as the meadow foam. And a number of rare plants occur there, as well as in other areas. But Southern Oregon buttercup is another rare species. So you can see there's a map that shows where it occurs. Again, the map is from the Oregon Flora Project. If you just put in the species name, then it will come up and the map will be part of it. You can see where the sites are. So Southern Oregon buttercup looks a lot like Western buttercup. But if you find a buttercup that looks like Western buttercup in dry oak habitats, so this is in the dry part, not in the wet pools, and you look underneath the petals and it has this kind of brownish and reddish color, that's our rare and endemic Southern Oregon buttercup, a really special species. And you can find that out at the Whetstone Savanna Preserve as well as other places. These are large flowered blue-eyed Marys. And so again, there's a map just to show you how to use that map. So that's a species that's much more broadly distributed, and just out of curiosity, which I often do just out of curiosity to see who's hosted by a flower. If I think, oh, that might be a cool one to put in my yard or try to collect seed, this one is host to 3 likely species of checker spots. So again, I would encourage you, if you get a chance, to go out around those vernal pool areas in the agate desert to explore in the early spring there. Another trail that I like and that I have a lot of pictures of and a lot of iNaturalist kind of tags, so that's why I like to share it, because people can go and kind of see what they're looking at, is at the Rogue Community College, the Rookland Memorial Trail. They have wonderful oak woodlands, so it's near Grants Pass. Late April is a good time to go there. So it's a nice, small, accessible trail system. It's not steep, it's not long. It's not paved, so I think it would be hard if you were in a wheelchair or using a walker, but it's a very easy walk and a wonderful place to see a lot of our diversity of our oak kind of habitat flora. So what we're looking at here is a showy plant that a lot of you probably know called Warrior's Plume, Pedicularis densiflora, and it's in the Orobanchaceae family. It's a hemiparasite, so it does photosynthesize, but it also has root relationships with plants of the heath family, so things like madrone and manzanita, and it gets nutrients from the roots of those plants as well. And it is also a supporter of butterflies, so 2 confirmed and 2 likely, again, checker spots as well as other things, and that's from Calscape. If you go out there, another one that often people ask about, catches people's eye, is the California ground cone, Copsiopsis. It used to be Bosniakia, which was one of my favorite genera, just for how it rolled off the tongue. So this one is a total parasite. It's a mycotrophic plant. So it's a parasite of the mycorrhizal fungi of ericaceous plants like manzanitas and madrones also, so the heath family. And just really spectacular, comes up really purple and beautiful, and then dries and looks like a cone that's kind of standing on the ground. Fawn lilies. Our Henderson's fawn lily, Erythronium hendersonii, is one that's commonly in our oak woodlands, really beautiful. And they call them fawn lilies because they have these kind of mottling in the leaves like that, speckling like a fawn kind of. So just out of curiosity, again, the way I use these websites, I just went into the Oregon Flora and typed in Erythronium, and these are the genera or the species of Erythronium in Oregon, along with their distribution. So you can see here's our Henderson's fawn lily and where it occurs. So it's a Southwest Oregon species. We have other species that are in other areas. Grass widows are a very showy and beautiful plant, Ulcinium douglasii, and they are kind of in the iris group. And you can see this one, I looked up at, let's see, what don't think they had any information on pollinators, but you can see there's a little beetle or somebody in there in my picture on that one. Shelton's violet. So we have lots of species of violets. This one's kind of distinctive and easy to identify because it has these really divided leaves like that. You'll see the leaves. The flowers don't last too long, but the leaves are out longer into the year, but it's a yellow violet. And look at all the species that are hosted by our violets. So 17, again, from Calscape. Viola sheltonii. Shooting stars, a species that people know, very often recognize. And who do they take care of? Oh, look, they have two. So Arctic blue and spotted cutworm are listed in Calscape. Primula hendersonii. Oops, western butterweed. So this one stands up tall, maybe about knee high. And again, these pictures, in a minute, I will show you something about iNaturalist and some other resources. If the pictures don't look familiar from how I've taken them, you can see other pictures that will show you that look like things you recognize. So butterweed is in the composite family, Senecio intergeramus, and it hosts quite a bit more species than the primula at any rate. So 18 likely, painted ladies, northern checker spots. So that means that these are plants that the caterpillars of these insects can eat to survive. Camas, we have actually a number of species of camas and subspecies of camas, and that again was a really important native food supply. Have a storage bulb in the ground that's cooked and eaten. And that's often in kind of vernally wet areas associated with oak habitats or oak savannas. This is called silver crown. I think silver crown, it must be because this is in the dandelion group in the composite family. When the flower is done, it kind of makes a dandelion puff, and I'm guessing that's why it's called that, although I'm not sure. But it has a pretty distinctive big leaf, about as big as my hand, like that, a palmate leaf, and it's one that folks notice. The flowers actually can be a little bit kind of cryptic. I mean, they're yellow and they are showy, but they don't last a long time, but people will notice the leaves and wonder what they are. And that's Cacoleopsis, not to be confused with the ground cone. The oak woodlands are some of the best habitat for spring wildflowers. So we'll share a little bit more. Those were all from the Rogue Community College trail system there, which I will have a link on my resource page that I'll share with you here at the end. I wanted to share, since I'm involved with the Native Plant Society, I wanted to share that we have a number of wildflower brochures a great group of volunteers put together a brand new one. We have, we have Grizzly Peak, Mount Ashland, the Cascade Siskiyou National Monument, and now a brand new one about the Cathedral Hills. It has a map and some of the especially showy flowers that you're likely to notice there, some kind of background information. You can find them at the Northwest Nature Shop, as well as other locations, and you can also get it online on the resource page. There'll be a link where you can actually get it online. And you can see where the Cathedral Hills is a wonderful place, great diverse, super flora in the spring and throughout the year. So this is Grants Pass and Cathedral Hills are there. So some more oak. These will look familiar to some of you if you get out into the oak woodlands. So Hooker's catchfly, or sometimes called Indian pinks, Silene hookeri, and we have some rare species of those as well. So I was just curious, who do they support? And there are 2 butterflies and moths hosted by those. Henderson's Tritolea is another one that people often ask about. Got this kind of, it's in the lily group. And people will sometimes call this pretty face, but pretty face is another species that is rare in our area. We don't see it very often. So the color of these flowers can vary from kind of yellow to sort of a cream color. They always have this purple streak. And the way they are different from Tritolea ixioides is that these anthers in the middle kind of pull together and make a little sort of a column in the pretty face, and ours are sort of more spread out like that. Blue dicks are another of our early spring. This was another Native American food source, again, with the bulb being eaten. Sometimes you'll see them in areas where they're very concentrated, and that always makes me think that this is a gathering ground when I see those together. I don't know that for sure, but I wouldn't be at all surprised. So I've got these as Diclostemma capitatum, and I think they might have changed to Diclostemon or something slightly different, but they're still the same creature. How about this? What's this beautiful, gorgeous plant that people worry about here? It's a host to 9 confirmed species of butterflies and moths, 86 likely species. This is our buckbrush, so Ceanothus cuneatus. It's great habitat for blue-gray gnatcatchers and spotted towhees and other birds and animals. If it's in the wrong place, too much of it, it can be a fuel concern for wildfires, but we also need big patches of it to provide habitat for blue-gray gnatcatchers and birds and pollinators. So when you're concerned about fire, it's always about where it is and how it is organized, but don't automatically think that buckbrush is a problem. It's a wonderful plant. Ptolmy's pussy ears. This is one you probably, if you've been paying attention at all, that you would recognize. This is a Mariposa lily, and I happened to get a picture of this one with a little Adela moth, Calochortus tolmii. This again is from the Imperatrice property. Fiddleneck fireweed, Amsynchia menziesii, and it's in the borage family, so it's got that spiraling inflorescence of little flowers. Larkspur, Delphinium menziesii, really beautiful. I look forward to when we can get back up there again. So Table Rocks is another one of the areas that I wanted to recommend for people to actually go. I can't recommend the Imperatrice right now because we're not allowed up there, but many of the species in those pictures, really all of them, you would find places like Table Rocks or these other oak savanna or oak habitats, grasslands. So the Table Rocks are great for flowers in April, May, and June even. These white flowers are Tritolea hyacinthia. And it's the Table Rocks have a bit of a steep climb up to them, but then they're flat and it's not too far. So there are lots of guided walks. The BLM manages them and provides a lot of walks. A lot of kids go up there. Here's a really fun little trifolium called cowbag clover, and you can see it's very low to the ground. I wonder how this would be as a ground cover. Wonder if it would work like as a ground cover in vineyards, for example. It's got these little cute little kind of inflorescences that look like a little udder of a cow back down there. And then here's kind of a small tree, birch leaf mountain mahogany, which is again in the rose, the apple family. This one is up from the Table Rocks. Bulbous woodland star. This is all just to get you those kind of phytoendorphins, just seeing plants and feeling good about them. Making note of them. If you see the seeds available or you think you can collect the seed, you can give it a try. Lithophragma glabrum. These are really pretty oak woodland species. Here's Adelina grande, which used to be called something else, and now I've forgotten what that is, but it's hound's tongue. So this is another kind of, it looks like a great big forget-me-not, a great big borage family member, and pretty big, again, can get to be about knee-high with your, where the inflorescence is. The leaves come up early. And again, going out and walking, throughout the year gets you to learn what the different things look like. A lot of times people will ask me, what are these leaves? This is one of the leaves that people will ask about, that and the Western butterweed. They have a distinctive look to them, but until they get flowers, people won't recognize what they are. But if you go out through the year and you notice where they are, especially if you have land, then you'll notice, because these are perennial species. This is Klamath plum, and this is again from the Table Rocks. So Prunus subcordata, and the Prunus is a real powerhouse genus for hosting native plants. So if you're thinking about putting shrubs or trees into your landscape, Prunus is a really good, especially native Prunus is a really good one to choose. So you can see here, wildlife supported by this species of Prunus, our Klamath plum, 58 likely, including swallowtails and a bunch that I cut off because I didn't want to put them all on there. But we have also, so this is Klamath plum, we have bitter cherry, which is Prunus marginata, and Virginia, the choke cherry, which is Prunus virginiana. And all of those are really, they host a lot of species of insects. Sea blush can form these wonderful big swathes of kind of pink flowers and grasslands anywhere in our area. That's Plectridis congesta. And then here's a lovely one, Dicentra formosa. So you can put at the Extension Center, we have some wonderful patches of bleeding hearts, of our native bleeding hearts. So those are a nice one for your gardens. Let's see, 3. So I guess I'm just going to go with this, and I'm going to give you a chance to take a 5-minute break here and take a bio break. And then when we come back, we will move on with our learning. For a minute, I got to get my cat what he needed. So we have talked a little bit about the Anthropocene, and we've talked a little bit about native plants and why they matter. And then I shared with you a bunch of species, and you might have felt overwhelmed, but hopefully you also felt good. And now I'm going to share with you some tools for plant ID. When we understand how those habitats are important, and the more we learn about them and the species, kind of knowing what we're looking at is part of the important process. So we talked a little bit about invasive plants, so let's talk about native plants. I think I'm talking to the choir, but I'll go ahead and say a few words about that anyway. So a native plant is a plant that has developed or evolved where it lives. It's indigenous to that place. When you think about native plants, you want to really think about including the geography in it. So a lot of things are actually billed as native, and they're native to the US, or they're native to the West Coast, or they're native to the West, those kinds of things. And in terms of insects, it's good to always, and kind of supporting wildlife, and I'll talk about that a little bit more and kind of the scaffolding of that. But it's, the more local you can be, the better you are in terms of serving and supporting the community with the plants that are around you. So there are species that are naturalized, so they've been in their new home for a long time, sometimes for hundreds of years, plants that maybe came with first European colonists, but they're still not indigenous, and they won't have the depth of kind of wild relationships with other organisms. Native plants have co-evolved in a mutually supporting web of life. So you probably have seen headlines like this back in 2018 with that World Wildlife compendium that came out. I saw this headline go by: the insect apocalypse is here, and there's all this tracking of insect populations going down. So that also translates into bird species becoming fewer, especially those that specialize in eating insects on the wing, like swallows and things like that. So 2 in 3 barn swallows have been lost since 1970. And we're not factoring in all the other birds that don't specialize but need insect larvae to feed their young as well. So again, Cornell has kind of parsed all of that and looked, and we've lost close to 3 billion birds since 1970. So 1 in 4 birds gone in terms of the volume of birds that are out there. And when we spool this out, again, many of you are probably aware of that, but protein-rich insects are critical food source for most breeding birds. They don't feed their babies fruit or seeds or things like that. They feed them caterpillars and insects. Most insects are specific to their host plants, not just for nectar. We often think of pollinators and supporting the pollinating part of the insect life cycle, where there might be, they're pollinating the plants and they're getting nectar for energy perhaps, but where they lay their eggs and then the insects need to eat those plants when they come out of the eggs, that's what the kind of relationship you need. So the reproductive needs for egg-laying caterpillars and feeding. So 90% of plant-eating insects are specialists, actually. They really only work with, monarchs are famous, but a lot of insects are associated with certain plant species. So natives matter, and so we want to get to know them. so we can choose them. So a word about plant names, common names are variable. I think I mentioned this before, even scientific names change. Pronounce the names how the person you are with says it. That's the advice in the Jepson manual, or how it will help you remember it, or to remember how to spell it, which I'm a terrible speller, so that's helpful. Books are one way, books and guides. So I include this kind of picture in the resource list that I'm going to give you a link to at the end, but these are some of my favorites. Bringing Nature Home, which I'll talk a little bit more, that's Doug Tallamy, and he's done so much to kind of articulate the need for native plants supporting kind of the web of wildlife. Garden Smart is a nice resource that helps you choose native plants over kind of common ornamentals. Gardening with Oregon Natives, that's an OSU publication. This is from Susie Savoy and Tom Landon, Native Pollinator Plants. So really looking locally, and that's an online link. Trees to Know and Shrubs to Know both come from OSU, and that's great. I like, let's see, Plants of the Pacific Northwest. So that's Pojar. That's again, that's kind of a nice, it focuses on the coast, but a lot of what we have is here as well, and they have an interior version. Flowers of the Table Rocks by Susan McKinnon, and now there's a new version, so that's really hyper-local, looking at the Table Rocks, but is also really great for our oak woodland species. If you're going to buy one book, it's also got lots of pictures, so for a book that normally they can only have a picture or two, as I am having in this presentation, but her book really has quite a lot of pictures in it. If you like grasses, there's now a nice field guide for grasses in Oregon and Washington. And then if you like to key things out, if you want to go beyond kind of looking at pictures, which is a completely valid way of starting, but once you kind of want to delve in more and you want to key things out, the Flora of Oregon is just, so this is, I've been sharing the website of the Oregon Flora. This is the book that they are putting together, the same people. So they've got volume 1 and 2, volume 3 is still coming. They've gone through A through F in the families as well as the monocots. And then the Jepson manual is for California. So it's a fabulous resource, but they have a lot more, I think they have, you know, thousands and thousands more species than Oregon. So when you're trying to key in Oregon species, you kind of have to weed through those California species. And then I also like this Kozloff book, The Plants of Western Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia. Again, for keying, it just kind of narrows it down. But now that the Flora is coming out, that's my primary one that I like to use. But iNaturalist and is my favorite app. And because of the problems with the videos, I'm going to wait and show you a video after. But I occasionally give a class on using iNaturalist. It's the kind of app where you can point it at the plant, and then the automatic or the artificial intelligence, which is built by human looking at plants and identifying them and confirming them, kind of will predict what your species is. And it really works remarkably well. It's a great way to kind of give you a leg up in learning what you're living with. There are other apps, I will admit, even though I'm really such a fan of iNaturalist. And again, I'll show you that video at the end if we feel like we want to delve into that. But Seek is by iNaturalist, and it just IDs things, but doesn't do the other kinds of keeping track of what you've seen for you. The Oregon Flora Project I've mentioned has a web page, and they also have an app called Oregon Wildflowers. And then there are others that people talk about that I haven't really experimented much with, but people really like PlantSnap. PlantNet is another one. Picture This, Flower Checker, Garden Compass. Someone even mentioned Google Identify for using for species. But hopefully we'll come back to iNaturalist a little bit. But it's kind of a whole class unto itself. Another really great resource, and I'm not just saying this because I'm a part of it, I have been a part of it for a really long time, but is the Native Plant Society of Oregon. So there are 13 chapters. If you're visiting from someplace that's not local, you can see the map there. And we have our local chapter is the Siskiyou chapter. And if you go to the website and you click on the chapters link and you click on Siskiyou, you'll find other resources, like some of the resources about where to get plant materials that I'm going to share with you later. Those are found on the website. The We provide plant walks April through May and August. So our organization reaches out to folks to lead walks, special places, and you can learn with experts. There's also a really wonderful group of kind of plant enthusiasts that's going out much more frequently and learning together called the Siskiyou Plant Explorers. And they communicate through a Google group. If you connect with our chapter, you'll get information about that. There are chapter meetings and presentations September through May, and we, all through the pandemic, like everyone, we kind of went online with that. Now we're working on getting those to be hybrid. We have been recording them, these presentations, to learn about native plants and related ecological topics, and we've been posting them on our YouTube channel, like lots of other people, like the land stewards are doing that as well. So there's some really wonderful, great learning resources from the Siskiyou chapter of the Native Plant Society's YouTube channel. One of them, which is relevant to this talk, is an update and tour of the Oregon Flora Project's website. And I really recommend you kind of use that. Go to that website, again, from the resources at the end of the presentation. And Linda Hardison walks us through all about using the website and how it's useful. It's every time I see her present, I learn more things, but you can find out, choose the right plant for your garden and landscape. They've got deep resources on that about finding kind of what would be good plants, what grows in your area, identifying plants you've seen in Oregon, finding where plants grow. That's how I use it a lot, is, kind of finding the range. If I'm somewhere and I think a plant is a certain species, I'll go to the map, and if it's in that area, that can be one of the things that helps me determine if I am indeed right in keying it out. So those are a few resources for learning plants. So tools for ID, and now we're going to kind of focus. I have shared a few walks and places to go, but I'm going to kind of just sort of tip my hat to that topic a little bit more about places to meet our native neighbors. And because I'm telling you to go out into the wild world, I want you to know that when you're outside, you can get hurt. It's not very, it can happen. Not very likely. Rattlesnakes, ticks, exposure, poison oak, injury can all be possibilities. Be prepared. Have your water and your appropriate clothing and sturdy shoes. Tell someone where you're going. And don't spread non-native seeds. So clean your boots before you go and when you return, so you're not transferring weeds that might be around. So the walks that I am providing links to on the resource at the end are included here. Some of these we've talked about. We've talked about the Ruckland Memorial Trail at the RCC Woodlands. So that's oak woodlands and mixed conifer, April through June, really great variety and lots of iNaturalist tags. So if you get hooked by iNaturalist, as I hope you might, then that's a great place to go. There are a lot of species that have been marked there. The Cathedral Hills, I didn't go into depth on that. I don't have photos of it, but we have a nice guide for it, and there's a wonderful trail system and lots of resources for that. And it's a really popular place around Grants Pass if you're in that area. The Table Rocks, both upper and lower, are wonderful places to visit April through May, really throughout the year, but they have peak spring wildflowers there. And then the Pacific Crest Trail is another terrific resource. So that kind of snakes through our area, and I'm going to talk about a couple of spots here. I think I talk about one. Anyway, the PCT to Hobart's Bluff is a wonderful one that I'll share some pictures of. It's at a higher elevation, so June through October, it's snow-free, but it's also great all year, unless you can't get there because of the snow. Which isn't always, it depends on what the snow is like. And then the East Applegate Ridge Trail is a nice one, and I created a video about that one as well, so you can, maybe we'll look at that at the end, but I'll show you some pictures from there. The Sterling Mine Ditch Trail is an area of critical ecological concern. It just wanders around through the Siskiyou Mountains, around the Buncombe area, and goes in and out of a wide variety of habitats, from conifers to oak habitats to chaparral and grasslands, and has wonderful diversity of species. I'm hoping to put together a video on that one. Mount Ashland is a good place, especially later in the summer. If you go up there in July, you can still find flowers even in August and into September until the snow flies. There will be late flowering species up there, lots of buckwheat and things. Once spring is done at the lower elevations, you can always go up higher and find flowers. And then I didn't put any information except for a link in my resources about serpentine habitats, and $8 Mountain Boardwalk is another, is a short walk, and that is ADA accessible. You could get there with a wheelchair or a walker if you wanted to. It's very short, and it has the wonderful serpentine. It's serpentine fen with Darlingtonia and things like that. So let's look at, we've looked at a few, let's look at a few more. Let's look at the PCT to Hobart's Bluff. So these are some of the views. You can see we're looking down past Immigrant Lake and up towards Medford there in that view picture. We have views of Pilot Rock. That's my background for this presentation. And now we'll see some of the things that you can see. Again, it's remarkably diverse. You go through fir forests, conifer, mixed conifer forests with true firs and Doug firs, go through little oak woodlands, little kind of scab areas with kind of rocky outcrop species. It's really wonderfully diverse and pretty short, like 2 miles, I think, round trip or something like that. So here's a quiz. We've seen this friend before, and this is on the trail to Hobart's Bluff. Anybody remember who this is? Any level of remembering is good. Doesn't have to be the species or the genus. It could just be the group. Lomatium, very good. Pestle lomatium, pestle, nice. Exactly, very good. Wonderful, yes. There you go. This picture is from the trail to Hobart's Bluff. Here's another one that I'm very excited about is our native peony, Brown's peony, and I have been able to start this plant from seeds. So I'm hoping that at some point I will have this in my garden. In fact, I already do. I don't know how long it will take to be a flowering plant, but it's this kind of wonderful, has sort of almost like watermelon-y foliage. For some reason, it reminds me of watermelons. And then this shy peony flower that nods its head down. And if you tip it up, it's really just spectacular. Columbine, Aquilegia formosa. So that's another good bet for a garden plant. Diffuse phlox grow up there in the outcrop areas. This is in that first picture where I asked you why you liked wildflowers. This is another of its common name is Oregon Jacob's ladder, Polemonium carneum. And we have a few species of those. We have blue Pulcherima and some others. There's a really rare one that's up on Mount Eddy, which sometimes they're also called skyrockets if they're up high, but that one is a lovely one. Love that one in the spring. Here's another, I should ask you the family of this one. See if how botanical you are without my guiding you. Here we go. This is Gray's lovage, but yes, Apiaceae, right, Lynn, very good. Right, so you can see that ferny foliage is a tip. It's not always that truth, but it's got these umbel inflorescences there. So that's not a lomatium, although it looks like it might be, but it is not. And when it gets fruit, you can really tell. This is woodland rose, Rosa gymnocarpa, our naked fruited rose. If you look underneath, the hypanthium doesn't have any glands on it. I know, she is. We should say ask everybody except for Lynn. Here's our beautiful Oregon geranium, Geranium oreganum. This one, I have not seen this one as an option for gardens, and I think it should be. It's just really spectacular. Again, getting to be, you know, maybe not quite knee high, but these flowers are you know, 2.5 inches across or 2 inches across. It's very, very showy. And I didn't look up the insects, but I'll leave that to you on Cowscape. Here's another one that we've already seen. Okay, so everybody but Lynn, who am I? Who's this one from? This picture is from the Hobart's Bluff Trail. And it's often not quite as pink as that. I took this picture because it was pink, but it can also be white. Thimbleberry, very good. Okay, good job. You got it. I will only ask you the ones that I've given you more information on. Okay. thimbleberry, Rubus parviflorus. This again is from Hobart's Bluff, so getting up more towards where the bluff is. This is balsam root, our deltoid balsam root. And I have another little video that I put together distinguishing. Folks get confused between narrow-leaved mule's ears and deltoid balsam root. The flowers can look, I mean, they're both big kind of sunflowers, and if you're not paying attention to the leaves or the details of the flowers, they can look very similar. So if we have time, I'll look at that. I think we're going to run out of time, but the links will be in your information. So again, more plants from Hobart's Bluff. There's death camas, Toxicoscordion, a recent name change. Used to be Zygodenus venenosum, so that one is venomous. So, and it grows in similar habitats and often with camas plants, which are edible. Obviously, if it has flowers, you wouldn't mistake them, but when they're not flowering, you could. So they're ones to know how to distinguish. Ballhead Gilia, Gilia capitata. This is one I think is often available for folks in seed mixes. Woodland Star. Again, this is a kind of recent name change on that, Lismachia latifolia, and it's called Indian potato. Any guesses why? I mean, I bet you've seen this flower a lot. Why do you think it might be called Indian potato and one of the common names? I'm going to look in the chat. Eat the roots. Yeah, let's look at an herbarium collection. So again, here's the plant way up here. You can see because the scale, if you know what they are, maybe those leaves are kind of 5 inches across, 6 inches across, and way, way down in the ground, hard to get without breaking off and losing track of, there are these succulent little tuberous roots. Queen's Cup, just another pretty one with kind of distinctive leaves that people often notice when the flowers aren't there. Gets a blue bead of a cup. Calypso orchid is a perennial favorite. They look like little dragons to me, little low growing orchid, really one of our showy orchids. I just love them. Calypso bulbosa. We have a few species of Trillium albidum, the giant wake robin. And then we're going to go through a little series here of our more common kind of fritillarias. So the checker lily is one that is kind of, this is easy to walk by on the trail because it isn't red or a bright color, but once you pick up on it, it's always just so fun to see. So you can see they can kind of be greenish. They can also be all the way brown. Sometimes it's called chocolate lily as opposed to checker lily. And then there are red bells, which are our Fritillaria recurva, and you can see they have this lovely, this reminds me of, what was that really old show, That Girl, with the curly kind of 60s curly hair, red bells, Fritillaria recurva. So, and there is, what they think is that our rare Gentner's fritillary, so this is Gentner's fritillaria, is kind of a hybrid between both the Fritillaria recurva and the checker lily. So you can see it's not as recurved. It's kind of often a darker color, although the color varies quite a bit. And there are a number of details. It's kind of a heavier flower. And then there are a number of specific details that make it really easy to identify. But you can see if this is the child, maybe this is the mom and that's the dad, although that's not at all the way it works, but it's meant to be a hybrid between those two species. So that's our rare Gentner's fritillary, federally endangered. Yellow bells are another one. So Fritillaria pudica, that one grows closer to the ground. It's also pretty early spring flower. So a few places that you can see, a number more kind of a couple of other trails that pass through wonderfully diverse habitat, including the oak habitats and the mixed conifer and the chaparral and the grass habitats that I really want to kind of give a nod to are the Sterling Mine Ditch Trail and the East Applegate Ridge Trail. So these pictures are from the Sterling Mine Ditch Trail. So lots of views, wonderful views of diverse Applegate, Siskiyou mountains, kind of beautiful habitat. Some of our pictures are from there. And then I put together a video of the East Applegate Ridge Trail with some learning, kind of showing you some species and then quizzing you on the species as you go through. These again are like 3-minute videos, 1.5, 3-minute videos, and the links will be available for you there. Okay, so got tools. We talked about places to go. So now we're going to talk a little bit about where to get seeds and plants, which you might have known. And again, we're going to kind of review. We understand that we have been simplifying our landscape in terms of structure and the arrangement of who is there, who the species are that are there, and in terms of the actual species. So this, I really like, someone shared this image with me, and I think it's a really great kind of representation of what happens when you simplify the landscape. So here's an agricultural landscape like you might see, you know, like you might have seen 70 years ago or 100 years ago, or that you might see in some place like Ireland, where you maybe have hedgerows, you still have meandering streams, lots of little kind of woodlots. So this is supporting a lot of different organisms that are living there, a lot of native species in the margins there. You start simplifying that and you start seeing species drop out. And when you really simplify it, like if you fly over in an airplane over on the way to Minnesota, which I do now and then, and you see the landscape like this, then you've really simplified it. So you've really taken away kind of the diversity that supports the wildlife. So we need to reverse this trend. How can we do that? So let's just look. Here we are. This is the Extension Center right there. That's where I am often working. And this little green spot right there used to be a seed forest for Weyerhaeuser, but now it was a field, a grain field over the past year. And you can see, what do you think? This is our valley, our Bear Creek Valley here, if that kind of orients you, if you know the area. What would this habitat have been? I mean, we can see what it is now. It's like, this is urban neighborhoods with lots of trees, and probably a lot of them are not native. Probably some of them are, but a lot of us, probably lots of red maples and tulip trees and catalpa and things like that in our beautiful yards and our garden plants. Here's our agriculture. And the other side, we have big pear orchards. These are our riparian areas. Look at how straight they are. Some of them are just called canals now. That probably would have been a lot of oak habitat in there, but it's not now. So how can we kind of reverse that trend? We really have a great opportunity. We all have such a great opportunity. As we've seen, when native plants disappear, the insects disappear, and that impoverishes the food source for birds and other animals. But there's an important, simple step that we can take to help reverse this alarming trend. Everyone with access to a patch of earth can make a significant contribution towards sustaining biodiversity by simply choosing native plants. They don't all have to be native, but you can just choose them. And I know that Lynn is going to tell you that later, but it doesn't hurt to hear it more and more times. So where do we start? One choice at a time. Can we get on the tree committee and choose the trees that are in our cities? Urban yards and gardens, urban trees, urban parks. Can each of us add more natives in our yards and gardens? What decisions do you have influence on? Start where you can, one plant at a time. The thing I love about this is there's so much kind of bad news in the world about these topics, but this is a place where we can really make an impact and have see a difference. And I wanted to share with you a little really specific example. Didn't mean to go so fast. This is outside my window at the Extension Center. I happen to be lucky enough to have the native plant garden right outside my window. This is a white alder, and this is a quaking aspen, both native tree species. And I like to kind of very loosely track the birds that I see out there. And in the wintertime, recently, I was noticing when there weren't any leaves on the trees, there were not a lot of leaves in the bushes, but there were a lot of leaves on the ground, which is great because I see the spotted towhees jumping around there and looking for bugs. But I saw little black-capped chickadees and kinglets kind of flitting around and pecking. Sometimes there's a downy woodpecker, and they'll just be like examining these little nooks and crannies here. It doesn't look like there are any bugs or pollinators are out. It doesn't look like there's anything to eat. And this is in the winter when it's cold. No pollen, locally, nothing going on to attract insects. So I went out there with my hand lens and I looked closely at these little crevices, and I recommend you do this. And so I went out there yesterday, so it's not the winter anymore, but I got there with my little 10-power lens that I can put on my iPhone, and in the crevices are little critters. And when I looked with my hand lens, I saw little legs sticking out of all these little crevices on these native plants that are out there in the native garden. So that's what the chickadees and the kinglets and things are looking for and eating. oops, let's see. So more examples from my yard. This is Pacific alum root, Heuchera micrantha. This is wild ginger, which I just love. And there's not a lot of information about pollinators and insect supported. They're meant to be, I can't remember if the seeds are dispersed by ants, and I don't have a picture of the flowers, but the flowers are cryptic but spectacular. And it's a really great, it's really spreading in my yard on the shady side, kind of on the north side. It's a great low, moist, fire-wise ground cover for areas, as is our native woodland strawberry. So that's just Figera vesca. I've put those under my my berry plants, and they are great. I'm also spreading them all over, kind of, so I have ground cover and not bare soil, but something. They're also very drought resistant. I don't give them a lot of water, and they really hang in there. Then these, I am starting by seed, and this will probably be years before these are big plants, but I'm starting lots of lomatiums and other things, seeds that I gather. So this is your California lomatium, planted November in 2021, and then this was in February, and this is the fernleaf lomatium coming up there. And I've now planted them into the ground. I start them in a pot and then put them in the ground. So places where you can get materials, native plant materials. I mentioned the Siskiyou chapter of the Native Plant Society. We have a plant resources page that's hosted on our web page. It's also on the Facebook page. It's in the link that I'm going to share at the end. So lists of nurseries as well as people that sell seeds. I really like the Klamath Siskiyou seeds. They sell seeds, and she also is a great learning resource about, if you click through her links, that's Susie Savoy, you'll find lots of resources about seeding with native seeds, what works, what doesn't, what they've done. Really great resource for learning how to do it. The Rogue Native Plant Partnership, they sometimes have seed sales. I share these over my email list when I get this information. They also have lots of learning references, how to take care of plants, ecological restoration, seed cleaning. You can connect with them or the Understory Initiative and also learn more about kind of starting with native seeds, if you have a way to get them either by buying them or maybe you have land or places you can collect them. And then, of course, we can't forget our Master Gardener Association. You know, our spring garden fair would normally be a resource, but not happening these days. But I noticed that on the 12th of this month, there's going to be a pop-up sale, and I know they've been having lots of pop-up sales with lots of native plants available, thanks to Lynn and other dedicated folks. So there are lots of places you can get seeds, starts, check out, know like where it's native to, pick things that work in your garden, use the Oregon Flora website. So we have wandered through our local Anthropocene, thinking about why native plants matter, tools for plant ID, met some places that we can go on walks to meet our native neighbors and find out what might work in our yard and just appreciate them, and where to find seeds and plants. This is the resource page, which in a second I'm going to put into the chat, and then you can copy it and paste it and put it somewhere. So this will be the resources that I've listed here. Now, I was just wondering if we could revisit that question while I put that link in the chat about why you're interested in wildflowers, and see if there's any more. Oops, escape. Hold on. I got to get that into the chat for you. Hopefully you can put that in. Oops. Okay, here it comes. That's the link to my resource page. And and now I have to go all the way through. Oh, I don't know if that's going to work. And if you have specific questions, I think we just have a minute or two here. I'll just leave that. Okay, so I'm just going to read through some of these. Start with your yard. Remove half the lawn. Lynn, native plant nursery at SOREC. Yes, that's the pop-up. Want to build my property to a haven, 70%. Have an oak forest already. Yay. Okay. Any other questions or thoughts? I think we're.
Rachel, that was excellent as always, and so much information, very inspiring. And we all know we need native plants.
Yes.
And I know that tomorrow Lynn's going to talk about native plants at the same time slot, 3:00 tomorrow. There was one question that Lynn herself posted.
Okay.
She wanted to know, let me get back to that, about whether, let me just see. Whether all lomatiums are edible.
All lomatiums. I couldn't answer that. My guess would be yes. I haven't seen one that isn't. But they're not all yummy. But the ones, all the ones I know are edible, but they are not all delicious. The California lomatium is truly, I mean, even the foliage is just a wonderful resource. Like, I think people should grow that. I think people should grow that and then sell it at top dollar to fancy restaurants and have it as, garnishes or lomatium, in their salad or their soup. I think that in terms of sort of alternate kind of markets, I think that is one that really could be marketed. But many of them are kind of more medicinal, like the seeds. I love to just chew on the seeds, and I bet the roots are not that good either. But to me, they always, like the fern leaf lomatium, it feels more medicinal. That one is edible. I mean, I just like nibble on it, but it again tastes more like medicine than like food. But there's another one, Piper's lomatium, that grows up. I didn't put a picture of that, but it grows up on table rocks and but very early in the spring, like in February or March. It's tiny, and that's another one that's called Indian potato. So really, I mean, they're called biscuit roots, and I can't say because I don't know, that there might not be one that's not edible, but I would guess that they are.
Okay. Also, Cheryl Castine said that PlantNet is fabulous, so just put in a plug for another resource. And no one else entered questions, and unfortunately we're out of time.
We're out of time. Perfect. Excellent. Well, nice to see you all, and hopefully I'll see you out there in the real world.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Really appreciate it. On behalf of Jackson County Master Gardener